Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to the final part of our series of videos focusing on crimes involving fast food workers. If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2, be sure to check those out first. We'll leave a link in the description below. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this. It really helps us to continue building the channel. With that out of the way, here is part 3 of 3 terrifying crimes targeting fast food workers. Just after midnight, on the morning of November 18th, 1978, 17-year-old Brian Kring arrived at the Burger Chef fast food restaurant where he worked in Speedway, Indiana. Though he was not scheduled to work, he was friends with the 4 employees who were on the Friday closing shift the previous night. 16-year-old Daniel Davis, 17-year-old Ruth Shelton, 16-year-old Mark Flemons, and the 20-year-old assistant manager of the location, Jane Freed. When Brian got to the restaurant, he expected to find his 4 colleagues cleaning up for the night. The location usually closed at 11 p.m. on Friday, but closing duties could last anywhere from 1 to 2 a.m. Since he wasn't doing anything else, Brian decided to give his friends a hand. However, when he entered the Burger Chef at around 12:15 a.m., he was surprised by what he saw. The lights to the restaurant were still on, but his colleagues were nowhere to be found. The back door of the building, which usually remained locked, was both unlocked and slightly opened. Several trash containers lay just inside the door, as if someone had been in the middle of taking them out. As Brian looked around, more disturbing details quickly stood out. Cash register drawers were on the floor, and the manager's office was a mess. A jacket that he had seen Ruth Shelton wearing earlier that day was also on the floor. Concerned, Brian contacted the local police. When members of the Speedway Police Department arrived at the scene, they quickly uncovered more disturbing details. The safe in the manager's office was found open, and empty currency bags, as well as an empty roll of adhesive tape, were found on the floor nearby. $581 in cash had been taken, but bizarrely, at least another $100 in coins had been left behind. Purses belonging to Ruth Shelton and Jane Freed were also among the items discovered in the restaurant. Despite the chaotic state the scene was found in, it became clear early on that police did not know what to make of the situation. Due to the relatively small amount of money stolen, they toyed with the idea that the crime was an inside job, and that the 4 employees on the closing shift had taken the cash to spend on a night of partying, staging the scene to look like a robbery. Because of their uncertainty about the nature of the crime, police allowed the Burger Chef to open on Saturday, and the entire restaurant was cleaned by staff when they arrived for work that day. No pictures were taken, and the scene was never thoroughly processed for physical evidence. But as the hours passed on Saturday, with no signs of the 4 missing employees, an air of panic started to set in. Police discovered Jane Freed's Chevy Vega later that morning abandoned about 1.5 miles away from the restaurant, and began to scour it for evidence. By this time, it was becoming clear to investigators that they were dealing with a likely kidnapping case. Still, they admitted to the local newspapers that they were stumped by the situation. There appeared to be no motive behind the kidnappings, and none of the families of the missing employees had received any demands for a ransom. Later that day, a 16-year-old witness came forward and told police about a strange encounter he had had with 2 men the previous night near the Burger Chef. The men had apparently approached him and his girlfriend and asked for their identification before advising them to leave the area. The teenager described the 2 men as white, shabbily dressed, and most likely in their 30s. One of the men had a full beard, while the other had fair hair and was clean-shaven. He also said that he had spotted Jane Freed's Chevy Vega in the parking lot of the restaurant. The encounter had taken place between 11:15 and 11:30, shortly after the Burger Chef had closed for the night. This lead would turn out to be one of the best that investigators would ever get in the case, and would remain an ongoing source of speculation. On Sunday, everyone's worst nightmare was confirmed, when police were called to a rural wooded area in Johnson County, roughly 20 miles from the Burger Chef in Speedway. Hikers had discovered the bodies of Daniel Davis and Ruth Shelton, lying side by side just off of a secluded path. Both had been shot execution style in the back of the head and neck numerous times. Jane Freed's body was found a few yards away. She had been stabbed twice in the chest with a hunting knife and looked like she had been killed as she attempted to run away. The blade of the knife was found broken off and still in her chest at a subsequent autopsy, but this information was not widely reported, as police hoped they could locate the handle of the murder weapon. The final body, that of Mark Flemons, was found a little further away from the others, down the side of a hill and near a creek. He had sustained multiple blunt force injuries, some of which were thought to be from a chain, though curiously, a few of his injuries appeared to have been inflicted a couple of hours before his death. Like Jane, it appeared that Mark had attempted to run away, though it looked like he had fallen. He had choked to death on his own blood. All 4 victims were eerily still dressed in their brown and orange Burger Chef uniforms at the time that their bodies were found. Following the grisly discovery, Speedway police reached out for help, and the FBI, the Indianapolis Police Department, the Indiana State Police, and the Marion County Sheriff's Department were all called in to assist. The combined agencies quickly got to work interviewing witnesses and tracking down leads, hoping to make up for the valuable time and information that had been lost due to the initial mishandling of the investigation by Speedway police. The attitude in the community at the time was one of significant panic. That summer, a woman had been shot to death in her garage, and in the fall, a series of random soda can bombings that had injured 2 people had left people further on edge. Though both crimes were later solved and were proven to be unconnected to the Burger Chef murders, to many at the time, it seemed like Speedway was becoming a hotbed of violent crime. On November 20th, at the start of the multi-agency investigation into the murders, the company that owned Burger Chef announced a $25,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the person or people responsible for the killings. 2 days later, investigators released sketches of the 2 suspicious men seen by the 16-year-old witness on the night of the murders. To aid in facilitating tips, the newspaper, the Indianapolis Star, offered citizens a way to submit information without identifying themselves to police. Those with information were advised to write their lead down in the form of a letter and to mark it with a random 5-digit number at the top and the bottom. The person would then rip off the bottom portion of the letter with one of the numbers, so that if their tip proved to crack the case, the anonymous person could later be matched to the letter to receive their reward. Less than a week later, the paper had already received 88 of these letters. The most promising of the leads police received eventually led them to a bar in the city of Greenwood, located in northern Johnson County. Supposedly, a man there had been bragging about his involvement in the murders of the Burger Chef employees. When an undercover investigator spoke to the man, he seemed to confirm his guilt, but quickly recanted this when he was arrested. Though he passed a polygraph test and police had no physical evidence on which to hold him, they still managed to obtain a few names from him, people that he said were involved in a fast food robbery gang. This information eventually led police to several people they believed could have been a match to the fair-haired and bearded suspects described by their 16-year-old witness. A particularly good match to the bearded man initially seemed like a major break in the case, but the day before the man could be put in a police lineup, he shaved his beard, and police had nothing else linking him to the crime. Interestingly, though none of the men who were questioned based on the information obtained from the man in Greenwood were ever arrested in connection with the Burger Chef murders, a couple of them would later be sent to prison for unrelated crimes. At least one of these involved the fast food robbery. Throughout the late 70s and early 80s, police received countless leads in the case that took them to numerous places throughout the U.S. Every few months, there seemed to be a new report in the media about a suspect being questioned, at one point taking investigators as far away as Dallas. But these leads were often dismissed as quickly as they came in. In March of 1981, the brother of Jane Freed was even briefly considered a suspect after being arrested on a cocaine charge, only to be cleared of any involvement just 6 days later. Finally, near the end of 1984, it seemed that police had come across a lead that would blow the case wide open. Information from a confidential informant led them to a 34-year-old man named Donald Wayne Forrester, who had recently received a 95-year sentence for a rape conviction. With his record, he was willing to do whatever was necessary to avoid being transferred into the general population of the notorious Indiana State Prison, as he feared for his life. Over the course of the next 2 years, Forrester began to give police valuable information. Though he was slow to deliver all of the details, Forrester reluctantly confessed that he was the one who had shot Daniel Davis and Ruth Shelton, and gave investigators the names of at least 3 other people who he said had participated in the brutal murders. Forrester also told investigators that the motive behind the crime had been an outstanding drug debt that Jane Freed's brother had, and that Forrester and his accomplices, who were the dealers, had come to threaten Jane on the night of the murders. Things had allegedly gone south when Mark Flemons had intervened to protect Jane, and that had led to a fight. This appeared to explain why some of Mark's injuries were sustained earlier than those of the 3 other victims. According to Forrester, the teenager had fallen and hit his head on the bumper of his associate's vehicle. Believing that he was dead, the gang decided to kill the other employees so that there were no witnesses. In addition to these details, Forrester was apparently able to lead police to the exact spot in the forest where the 3 victims were found, and provided accurate information about the positions and placements of their bodies. He also knew about the missing hunting knife handle from the murder weapon that had been used to kill Jane Freed. Forrester claimed that he threw the gun that he had used to shoot Daniel Davis and Ruth Shelton into a nearby river. Though police were never able to track down the weapon, after interviewing his ex-wife, they learned that Forrester had returned to the scene of the crime before the bodies had been found and recovered several shell casings. He had then flushed these casings down the toilet at his home. Because the house had a septic system, police were able to obtain a warrant to dig up the property, and discovered several shell casings matching the caliber of the gun that had been used in the murders. It seemed like it was only a matter of time before the crime would be solved, until in mid-November of 1986, someone familiar with the police investigation leaked the details to the media. Just a few days later, Forrester recanted his confession, saying that all the information that he had given to police had been coerced. It was theorized that he feared retribution from his accomplices. Up until that point, police had been investigating the other suspects based on Forrester's information in secret. Now, there was a public record connecting him to that information. Though police still had Forrester's taped confession, he refused to provide them with any more details, and the investigation stagnated. Authorities had been in the evidence-gathering phase, and without Forrester, they were unable to procure sufficient information to go after his alleged accomplices. A month later, the Marion County prosecutor announced that Forrester would not be charged in the case, adding that he doubted anyone ever would be. Though pessimistic, it seems that this statement was not unwarranted, as the notorious Burger Chef murders remain officially unsolved to this day, more than 42 years after they took place. Occasional updates on the case can still be found, but many of these are simply news reports reiterating the terrifying details of the case, or else explaining that police are hoping to try a new investigative technique that will finally succeed in solving the case. The frustrating thing for many ex-detectives who worked on the investigation is that they believe the case was indeed solved back in the 1980s, and that they simply weren't able to convict those responsible. Forrester died of cancer in prison in 2006 at the age of 55, but according to some reports, at least 2 of the unnamed suspects in the investigation are alive and are still living in Johnson County. On November 10, 2018, a week before the 40th anniversary of the terrible crime, a memorial to the victims of the Burger Chef murders was unveiled in Leonard Park in Speedway. If nothing else, it seems to be a sign that the community refuses to give up hope that the case will be solved, and that someday, justice will be done for the victims and their families. That brings us to the end of our list. Do you know of any other cases like this that you think we should check out? Tell us about them in the comments section below. As always, if you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest releases. Thank you for watching.